I think we're ready, as best I know how to be ready. Little Pilgrim's Progress. And another good thing about this book, it's in modern English, so we can understand it well. And it's about little Christian, not Christian, but little Christian. But, we're all Christians. Same journey these children are going through, we have been through and are going through. Little Christian lived in a great city called Destruction. Its streets were full of boys and girls who laughed and played all day long. This was in the summertime when the sun was shining and the city looked bright and pleasant. On the rainy days in winter, the children didn't feel so happy, and they would sometimes be glad to sit down quietly and listen to stories. Now and then a grave-looking man and a woman with a gentle face would come to the city for a little time, and these strangers always tried to make friends with the children and were willing to tell them stories whenever they would listen. There is a beautiful country, they would say, far away from this city. A very good and wise king rules over it, who loves little children dearly. The prince to whom your city belongs is wicked and cruel, and he hates our good king. But one day an army will come from the king's country to fight against your prince, and this city will be burned and all the people in it killed. Then the children asked, what will become of us? And the strangers always answered, you must leave this city now while you're young and strong, and travel to the king's country. In the celestial city where he lives, you will be quite safe. Little Christian heard this many times, and he often thought about it, but whenever he said to his playfellows, shall we go to the celestial city? They laughed at him and told him it was only a make-believe story about the king and that no city could be better or safer than their own. He showed, but little Christian felt quite sure that the strangers had spoken the truth. And one day he found an old book in which were written the very same things about the king and the celestial city and their own wicked prince and his city, which would certainly be burned when the king came. He showed the book to his friends, but they laughed all the more and said, that book was written hundreds of years ago. It's of no use now. The king's army has never come, and very likely never will. At any rate, we may as well play as long as we can. But little Christian did not want to play. He felt tired and unhappy, and he sat down and wondered whether he could find the way to the celestial city by himself. He was such a little boy that he was afraid he might be lost if he tried to make a long journey alone. He opened the book again and he read a beautiful story in it about the king's own son, who had once visited the city of destruction and had spoken kindly to the boys and girls in the streets, saying, suffer the little children to come unto me. Oh, if he were only here now, thought little Christian, perhaps he would take me back with him. But I could never go all that long, long way alone. Then the tears came into his eyes, and he rolled down his cheeks. They fell upon his clothes, and as he brushed them away, he saw how soiled and dusty his little suit had become. He had worn it a long time, and he had played so much that the cloth was getting quite thin and shabby. This added to his sadness, for he thought that if he did find his way to the celestial city, His clothes would be worn out long before he got there, and how could he expect the king to receive a little boy dressed in nothing but rags? At last he took up his book and went home, and his nurse wondered why he looked so tired and sad. He told her that he would like to go to the celestial city, but she laughed too, as his playmates had done, and said, "You're a silly boy. There is no celestial city. If you go wandering along the roads after those strangers, you will surely get lost." So little Christian went to bed and cried until he fell asleep. When little Christian went out the next morning, the sun was shining, and his companions were running about. They called to him to join them, but he said, "I cannot play. I think we ought to start on our journey." "Oh, you're foolish," they cried, "to be always talking about that celestial city. You'd better go and look for it instead of crying up and down and spoiling our fun." So they ran away, and little Christian stayed by himself. Presently, Christiana came down the street with her baby sister. She had been standing by when the boys had laughed at Christian the day before, and she had felt very sorry for him, that he should be teased like that. Christian liked Christiana, and he was glad to see her coming. She stopped to speak to him. "You're crying again, little Christian. You shouldn't listen to what those strangers say if it makes you so unhappy. Come into the fields, and we'll make daisy chains for the baby." Little Christian thought he'd like to do that. Christiana was gentle, and though she didn't believe the stories he had told her out of this book, she never teased him as the other boys had, or as the boys had. "You know," he said, as they walked along, "I must go to the king, because I have a burden to carry, and no one but he can take it from me." "Where's your burden?" said Christiana. "It's on my back, and it feels so heavy that it makes me too tired to play." Christiana looked very grave. "I think you must be ill, little Christian, if you fancy such things. You haven't any burden on your back." "Ah," said the little boy, "you can't see it, but I can feel it's there, and I shall always be tired until it's gone." Well, the three children stayed in the fields and were very happy together, but when Christian went home at night, he began to think of the celestial city again, and fretted until his nurse was quite angry with him. He had no kind mother to love and comfort him, and his father was one of the great men of the city and had no time for the little boy. Christian hoped that he would meet Christiana again in the morning, but she was busy at home, and the other boys and girls would have nothing to do with him because they said he was dull and stupid and couldn't play properly. So he wandered off into the fields by himself and sat down on a bank to think. After a while he heard a step near him, and looking up, he saw one of the strangers on his way to the city, a man with a grave but pleasant face, whose name was Evangelist. He had seen little Christian before, and he turned aside to speak to him. "Why are you crying?" he asked, for there were tears in the child's eyes. Little Christian felt so comforted by the sound of his gentle voice that he told him all his troubles all at once, how he wished to obey the king, and how his playmates had laughed at him, and how even his nurse and Christiana didn't believe the stories about the celestial city were true. Then Evangelist looked at him very kindly. The stories are all quite true, he said. The king loves little children. If you will obey him and begin your journey, he will watch over you all the way. And when you reach the celestial city, you'll be happy forever. I would go now, said little Christian, if I only knew the way. Evangelist turned round and looked across the field, along the path by which he had come. Do you see there's a gate at the other side of the plain? And he pointed to it with his finger. But little Christian's eyes were still dim with tears, so that he could not see the gate. Well, said Evangelist, there is a light shining above it. Can you see that? Oh, yes, said the little boy. I think I can. That's the way to the celestial city, through that gate. Now I will give you a message from the king. And Evangelist drew out a paper, which he put into little Christian's hand. There were words written on it in gold and beautiful colors, and Christian read them aloud. I love them that love me, and those that seek me early shall find me. That's the king's promise to all his little children. So do not cry any more, but go quickly to the gate and knock. One of the king's servants will open it, and he will tell you where to go next. Some of the boys were playing near the gate of the city, and they saw evangelists speaking to little Christian. They were not surprised at this because they knew that the strangers from the celestial city always talked to the children. But when Evangelist turned away and little Christian began to run across the plain toward the wicket, W-I-C-K-E-T, wicket gate, they all wondered where he was going. Little Christian is running away, cried one. He must be going to look for the celestial city, said another. Then he will get lost, exclaimed a third. We ought to go after him and bring him back. There were two boys named Obstinate and Pliable, who knew little Christian very well. They were older than he was, but the three had often played together. Obstinate was not a pleasant companion, for he loved to have his own way, and Pliable was used to giving up to him for the sake of peace. Little Christian did not care much for either of them, but he liked Pliable best. The two boys were vexed when they saw their little playmate running alone over the fields, for although they were often cross and disagreeable to him, they did not like to think of him being lost. We must make him come back, said Obstinate. What a stupid boy he is to believe everything he's told. Come along then, said Pliable. I will go with you. So the two boys set off, and as they ran, they shouted to little Christian to wait for them. But the child was frightened when he heard their voices, and he wouldn't even look around. If they take me back, he thought, perhaps I will never be able to get away again. And so he ran as fast as he could, but soon he began to feel tired, and because of the burden on his back, and Obstinate and Pliable were taller and stronger than he was, so before long they overtook him. Where are you going? Cried Obstinate. I wonder what you mean by making us run after you in this way. I'm going to the king's city, said little Christian. Won't you come along with me? Obstinate laughed. I should think not. What would be the good when we're as happy as we can be here at home? We will be a great deal happier with the king. His city is more beautiful than this, and we shall be quite safe there. I've told you before that our own city is not a safe place. As if you know, said Obstinate. Why do you talk like this? It's not nonsense, it's written in my book." Then Obstinate laughed again. "How many times do I have to tell you that your book is full of rubbish? There is not one word true. Now, are you coming back or not?" Obstinate looked very cross, and little Christian's heart began to beat faster and faster, but he answered bravely, "No, I am going to the king." "Well, go if you wish," said Obstinate. "Come on, Pliable, we might have saved ourselves the trouble of running after such a silly child. He doesn't know when he's well off." But Pliable stood still. "Don't laugh at him," he said. "Just suppose the book is true. He will be better off than we are. I think I shall go too." "Oh, do come with me," cried little Christian. "You do not know how happy we shall be when we are living with the king." "Are you sure you can find the city?" said Pliable. "Yes, Evangelist told me what to do. We must go to that gate beyond the plain, and the man there will show us the way." "You don't mean to say you're going," said Obstinate. "Why, even if there were a celestial city, two boys like you could never find it." Pliable didn't answer, but he made a few steps forward to the side of little Christian. He had often listened to the words of the strangers and had thought, "I may as well go as far as the wicket gate and see what the road is like." "I'm not surprised at little Christian," continued Obstinate, "but really, Pliable, you ought to have more sense. Just come back with me, and I won't tell anyone what you said and that you were going." But Pliable was not very fond of Obstinate, and he felt pleased at the idea of having his own way for once, so he answered, "It's no use talking. I've made up my mind. Goodbye, if you don't want to come too." "No, thank you. I'm glad to get rid of both of you." And with a mocking smile on his face, Obstinate turned back toward the city of destruction. "Now," said Pliable, when the two boys were alone, "tell me what sort of place this celestial city is." "Oh, it's very beautiful," replied little Christian. "Have you not heard the strangers tell about it? The king lives there, and his people never feel tired or unhappy. They wear shining clothes, which can never be soiled and never grow old." "I don't suppose they'll let us in." "Oh, yes, they will. Evangelist said so. See, he gave me this." And little Christian unfolded the king's message and let Pliable read the words for himself. "The king sent that to me, that I might know he would like me to go to his city. He didn't send me one." "You didn't meet Evangelist, but never mind. I am sure the king will be glad to see you too." "Well, tell me something else. What shall we do when we get to the city?" "First of all, I should like to see the king, and if he is very kind, I shall ask him where my mother is. You know, she went away when I was a little baby, and sometimes I've wanted her so much. One of the strangers told me that she was with the king." Now remember, John Bunyan wrote this and didn't know all the truth in the scriptures, but he wrote it to the best that he knew how. And so the idea is when you die, you go to heaven. But we know better than that. But anyway, one of the strangers told me that she was with the king, so I think she must be living in the celestial city. I wonder how long it will take us to get there. Did you ask Evangelist? Maybe if we walk a little faster, it might help." "I wish I knew," sighed little Christian, who was tired already, "and I wish I could walk faster. I'm afraid I shall be a very long time on this way. It's that burden on my back, which is so heavy, it makes me walk slowly. Pliable was just going to say, "What do you mean by always pretending you have a burden to carry?" when suddenly his feet sank deep into the grass, and he saw that he had walked into a marsh that lay in that part of the plain. "Oh," cried he, "where are we now?" "I don't know," said poor little Christian, whose burden made him sink deeper than Pliable into the soft green mud. "Let's try to get out." But the boys were frightened and confused, and they could not tell which was the way out of the marsh. It was called the Slough of Despond, and it was a dangerous place even for adults. Every step the children took seemed to lead them further into it, and at last Pliable grew very angry. "See what a mess we're in," he said, "and it's all your fault. I wish I had not come. If this is the beginning of our journey, what else may we expect on the road? Just let me get out of this horrible marsh, and I'll go straight home. You may look for the city by yourself." Little Christian didn't answer, for he was too frightened and unhappy to speak. His clothes were covered with mud, and every moment he feared that he would be smothered in the slough. How he wished that Evangelist would come to help him. But he could not see anyone near him. Far away across the plain shone the light above the wicket gate, and behind him lay the city of destruction. Pliable turned away from the light and at last succeeded in getting out of the marsh, but he never stopped to help his companion, and when little Christian looked back, he saw him running home as fast as he could. Oh, how desolate the poor little boy felt when Pliable was out of sight. "But I will go to the king," he said, and once more he struggled on, trying to find some firm ground. Then, when he was almost in despair, he heard a voice saying, "Wait a bit, I'm coming to help you." Little Christian felt very much inclined to cry when he heard the voice of a friend. He had almost made up his mind that Evangelist was wrong, and that the king did not care for little children to be traveling along this road to his beautiful city. "I'm so small," he thought, "and so stupid I can't even get safely across this plain. And what shall I do if I come to a high mountain or a deep river?" But just at that moment, a boy named Help, who was one of the king's servants, came near to the slough and saw poor little Christian struggling in the mire. Help was a kind-hearted boy, and he ran at once to see what he could do for the child. "How did you fall in?" he asked, but little Christian couldn't tell him. "Evangelist said I was to go to the wicket gate, and I did not know about the marsh." "Didn't you see the stepping stones?" "No, I was talking to Pliable, and we were not looking at the ground." "Oh, that was foolish. Where's Pliable?" "He got out, but he went home and didn't even try to help me." "Well, don't be frightened. I shall be able to reach you in a minute. The king will always take care of you. I wondered why he sent me over the plain today, but it was because he knew you would need me. Take hold of my hand and put your foot here. There, you are quite safe now." Little Christian stood trembling, with tears in his eyes. "You are very kind," he said. "I should never have gotten out by myself." "No," replied Help, "I don't think you would. Are you going to the celestial city?" "I wish to go, but I'm afraid the way will be too hard for me. Perhaps I'd better wait till I'm older." "No, you must not wait. The king will watch over you. And whenever you need a friend to help you, he will send somebody." "Are you sure?" asked little Christian. "I am such a little boy, and the others all say I'm stupid." "Never mind what people say. If you are one of the king's pilgrims, you are quite safe. You may feel the road long and hard and find it that way, but if you keep on bravely, you will come to the city at last. And then you will forget all your troubles because you will be so glad to see the king." Help spoke so kindly that little Christian did not feel afraid talking to him. "Do you think I will find my mother? Is she with the king?" "If she is with the king, you will find her. Is it long since she went away?" "She went away when I was a little baby. I can't even remember her at all, but we have her picture at the house. So I shall be sure to recognize her. She looks so sweet and kind. Sometimes I cry because she cannot love me." "Oh, but she does," said Hope. "The king does not let his people forget. I have no doubt. He has told her I don't know, maybe we should just skip these parts." Help was kneeling on the ground, wiping the mud away from little Christian's clothes with tufts of soft grass. He rose up, saying, "You have soiled your things very much, but you will have new ones before you get to the city. Don't lose sight of the light over the wicket gate and walk as quickly as you can until you reach it. Goodbye, and remember the king will always take care of you." "Just one more thing," said little Christian. "Have you been to the city?" "No, I've been very near to its gates, and then the king gave me some work to do for him, and I shall not go to live in the city until my work is finished." "How long will it take for me to get there?" "I can't tell you that. For some people, the journey is longer than for others. But if you love and obey the king, he will be sure to guide you to the city at the right time. Now I must go. If you are frightened again, cry to the king and he will hear you." Not very far from the city of destruction, there was a hill, and beyond the hill, a little village. In this village lived a number of people who called themselves the king's servants and pretended to love and obey him, although they did not really care anything about anything except their own pleasure and safety. They had been afraid to stay in the city because of all that the strangers had told them, but they did not wish to have the trouble of going to the king's country. So they built houses and made fields and gardens for themselves beyond the hill, and fancied in that place they were quite safe. A boy from the village, whose name was Worldly, happened to be walking across the plain on the very day when little Christian began his journey. Worldly knew little Christian by sight, because the people from the village often went into the city to visit their old friends. And when he saw the child coming, he wondered what he was doing so far from home. "Is it you, little Christian?" he said. "You're a long way from the city." Worldly was a tall, fine-looking boy, and little Christian felt pleased to be noticed by him, so he answered at once, "I'm going to the wicket gate." "The wicket gate? What for?" "To get rid of my burden." "Oh, of course," replied Worldly. "I know those burdens are tiresome things. It isn't everybody who can feel them, but when you do feel them, there is no comfort for you till they are gone." Little Christian was surprised to hear Worldly speak in this way, for the boys and girls in the city had all laughed at him and had declared that his burden was only imaginary. I hope I shall not have to carry it very much longer, he said. I am making haste to the wicket gate. Who put it into your head to go there? Asked Worldly. I met a very kind man named Evangelist, and he told me to go, and Worldly laughed. He may be very kind, but he doesn't know. I know him quite well. Look here, little Christian, I can tell you a much better way of losing your burden. Don't you trouble to go on that long journey. Yes, you see, I know exactly what Evangelist said to you. He tells everyone the same thing. You have been in that horrid slough already, and if you go through the wicket gate, you will find worse troubles than that. There are wild beasts and all sorts of dangers, and very likely you will just die of hunger and fatigue. But my burden is so heavy, sighed little Christian. I must get rid of it, and Evangelist said this was the best way. Well, of course, you can do as you like, replied Worldly, but I think you're very silly. How did you ever know that you had a burden anyway? I read it in the king's book, that everyone has a burden. I thought so. That book is all very well for grown-up people, but little boys like you can't understand it. You read it and you don't know what it means, and you just get your head full of nonsense. Now, I'll tell you what to do. I wouldn't go back to the city because they will always feel frightened, because you will always feel frightened, and it really isn't a very nice place to live anyway. If I were you, I should go round the hill to the village. I have some friends living in the first house you come to, and if you tell them I sent you, they will take you in and be as kind as possible. Then in a few days you'll forget all about your burden, and I don't suppose you'll ever feel it again. Little Christian felt puzzled. Worldly spoke so kindly that he could scarcely help but believe him, and he thought it would be very nice to live near to his old house and be able to see Christiana sometime. You can't do better than take my advice, continued Worldly. Never mind, Evangelist. That is the way, past the hill. You can't mistake the house because it's the first one you come to. Then he put his hands in his pockets and walked off, whistling a merry tune, and little Christian forgot all about the king and his message, and turned away from the wicket gate to go to the village beyond the hill. Little Christian went on toward the village as quickly as he could, but he soon became very tired indeed. His burden seemed to grow heavier by the minute, and until at last he felt ready to fall down beneath its weight. By the time he reached the hill, he could scarcely walk at all, and he wondered whether he would ever be able to make it to the house in which the friends of Worldly lived. But when he turned the corner of the road which led round the hill, he almost forgot his burden, for he had never before seen anything so terrible as that path. The side of the hill was very rugged, and the rocks hung over the road and looked just ready to fall. Christian went a little way, but he was soon so frightened that he dared not take another step. He fancied he could see flames of fire darting out between the rocks, and he shook all over with fear. Oh, I wish I had not come, he sobbed. What shall I do? Presently, a man appeared at a little distance, and as he came nearer, little Christian saw it was Evangelist. He had no smile on his face, and poor little Christian felt so ashamed and miserable that he almost wished the rocks would fall and hide him from the sight of his friend, whom he had disobeyed. "What are you doing here?" asked Evangelist. But little Christian hung his head down and didn't speak. "Are you not the little boy whom I found crying outside the city of destruction?" "Yes," sobbed Christian. "Did I not show you the way to the wicket gate?" "Yes." "Then how is it you are here? For this is not the way to the gate." "Oh," cried little Christian, "I didn't mean to do wrong, but I met a boy who told me I could get rid of my burden in the village, and I was so tired I thought I would go to the village. But I am sure the hill will fall on me, and I am so frightened." Then Evangelist said, "Listen to me. The king sent me to tell you about the celestial city. And you had his promise that he would love you and watch over you. When you fell into the slough, he sent help to pull you out. And you have read in your book that he will always take care of those who trust in him. Why did you believe what worldly said and turn away from the right path?" Poor little Christian was now crying very bitterly, and Evangelist laid his hand gently on his head. "You have grieved the king very much," he said, "but if you are sorry, he will forgive you." "Oh, I'll never be naughty again," cried little Christian. "I am very, very sorry indeed, but are you sure the king will forgive me?" "Yes, the king will always forgive you for the sake of his dear son who loved the little children so much. And I may go back to the wicket gate, or will the man turn me away?" The king does not allow him to turn anyone away. You have only to knock, and he will open the gate for you at once. Take my hand, and I will go with you past the hill." Little Christian wiped away his tears and was very glad to put his hand in Evangelist's hand and be led back into the fields. The hill, with its terrible overhanging rocks, was soon left behind, and the light above the wicket gate could be clearly seen. "If you make haste," said Evangelist, "you will reach the gate before it's dark, and you can stay there and rest until morning." Then with a kiss and a smile he told the child goodbye, and little Christian once again started on his journey. The sun was just setting when little Christian reached the wicket gate. He had walked very quickly, for he did not wish to be in the fields after darkness came, and he was now so tired that he felt very glad indeed to see the gate quite close to him. It stood in a beautiful stone archway, and over it hung a lamp which burned so brightly that its light could be seen even when the sun was shining. Round the top of the arch some words were carved into the stone, and little Christian stopped to read them. The words were, "Knock, and it shall be opened unto you." "That's what Evangelist said," thought Christian, and he began to knock on the door. He listened, but he couldn't hear anyone coming. So he knocked again, and in a few minutes the door was opened by a man who looked something like Evangelist. He wore the same kind of long robe. His face was grave and quiet. He smiled when he saw Christian and said, "Who is this little child?" "I am little Christian," replied the boy. "May I come in?" "Are you come from the city of destruction?" asked the man whose name was Goodwill. Yes, and I wish to go to the king. Then Goodwill opened the gate quite wide and took little Christian by the hand. As he was stepping in, Goodwill gave him a pull. Why did you do that? Asked Christian. And Goodwill answered, the wicked prince has a castle very near to this gate. And when he sees anyone leaving his country and entering the way of the king, he commands his soldiers to shoot arrows at him. Little Christian looked out and saw arrows lying upon the ground, and he felt very pleased to see Goodwill close the door. Now I'm safe, he said. Goodwill led him into his own house, which was just beyond the gate, and made him sit down to rest while he prepared some food for him. Who told you the way to the gate? He asked. Evangelist, replied little Christian, and he said you would tell me where to go next. Yes, I will tell you, but how is it that you came alone? Have you no father or mother? My mother is with the king, and my father has so much to do that he cannot spare time for a journey, so I was obliged to come by myself. Let's see. Help said that the king would tell her I was coming, speaking about his mother, and she would look out for me. Is that true? Quite true. But you won't see her until you reach the celestial city. Obstinate and Pliable came after me, said, and Obstinate was angry, but Pliable said he would like to go to the city. Then we fell into the slough, and he was frightened. So he went back home. I thought I should never get out, but help came, and he was very good to me. What happened next? Well, little Christian blushed. I was as bad as Pliable, he said, for when I met Worldly, I listened to him and turned away toward the village. The road is so dreadful, and I was afraid the rocks would crush me. But Evangelist found me and brought me into the fields again. And now you have entered the king's gate, and you are one of his little pilgrims. Tonight you must sleep here, and tomorrow I will show you the way to the celestial city. When the morning came, little Christian felt quite rested and ready for another day's journey. Goodwill brought him out and showed him a narrow pathway which went straight across the plain. Are there any turnings? Asked Christian. How shall I know if I come to a place where there are two roads? The way of the king is always quite straight, said Goodwill, and all the paths that lead out of it are crooked. And the wrong paths are generally wide, while the right path is narrow. If you look carefully, you'll not be mistaken. I wonder whether you could unfasten my burden for me, asked little Christian, when he was saying goodbye. I could walk so much better without it. I cannot do that, said Goodwill. You must carry it patiently until you come to the cross, and there it will fall off, and you will never see it again. Oh, how glad I shall be, sighed little Christian. Are there any other houses on the way beside this one? Yes, about the middle of the day you will pass the house of the interpreter. He's very kind, and if you ask to see him, he will show you many wonderful things. The morning was bright and pleasant, and little Christian enjoyed his walk very much. The birds were singing so merrily that he felt as if he must sing with them. and the air was so fresh and sweet that it seemed to take away all the weariness which had troubled him in the city of destruction. There is nothing to hurt me here, he thought. Worldly did not speak the truth when he said I should be frightened. Just when he was beginning to think he would like to rest for a little while, he saw a large house standing near to the road, and he knew that it must be the house of the interpreter. He went up to the door and knocked, and presently a servant came to ask what he wanted. I'm a little pilgrim, he said, on my way to the king's city. I stopped at the wicket gate last night, and Goodwill told me that the master of this house is my friend. May I speak to him? The servant went back and called his master, and soon the interpreter came out. He was an old man with a tall figure and a long white beard, and Christian thought he looked very wise. He put his hand on the child's head, saying, "What can I do for you, my little boy?" "Would you mind showing me some of your wonderful things?" asked little Christian. He spoke timidly, for he could not help thinking that although the interpreter might be pleased to have grown-up visitors at his house, a little pilgrim like himself would perhaps be in the way. "Goodwill told me I might come to see you," he added. The interpreter smiled. "Goodwill is my friend. Are you one of the king's little pilgrims? Come in, and I will find something that you would like to see." And let's see. I think we can finish this chapter. He took little Christian's hand and led him into the hall, where the servant was still waiting. The interpreter asked for a lamp, and when it was brought to him, he opened the door of a large room. Curtains were drawn before the windows, but the light of the lamp filled all the room with brightness. On the wall opposite to the door hung a picture, and when little Christian saw it, he clasped his hands and stood quite still. It was the picture of a man whose face was more beautiful than anything which little Christian had ever imagined. He was walking over a mountain top. All around him, among the rocks, grew briars and thorns, which had torn his garments in many places, and his feet were bleeding, for the rough stones had wounded them. In his arms he carried a little lamb. It was tired and had laid its head upon his shoulder, and he was looking down at it with gentle, loving eyes. Underneath the picture, in letters of gold, were written the words, "He shall gather the lambs with his arm and carry them in his bosom." "Was that lamb lost?" asked little Christian. "Yes," replied the interpreter, "lost and ready to die. Do you not see how tired it looks, and how its fleece is torn and soiled?" But the good shepherd heard its cry, and he never rested until he found it, and then he brought it home in his arms. "It must have been a very hard path," said little Christian. "The stones have cut his feet." It was a very hard path, but he did not mind because he loved his little lamb so. I have shown you this picture first because the Good Shepherd is our King's own son. And just as a shepherd loves his flock, he loves the pilgrims. The little pilgrims are like the lambs. You can think of this when you are sad or frightened, and remember who is watching over you. "I am a little pilgrim," said Christian, looking up at the interpreter. "A little pilgrim and a little lamb in the flock of the Good Shepherd. Now I will show you something else. And that's where we'll stop for tonight. Father, we're so thankful that we've been lost like this little lamb. Yes, I can't speak for everyone, but most likely we've all been in that city of destruction and taken our journey out of it, even out of the outskirts and the hills and the villages. And so we've been like that lamb and rescued by our good shepherd. Isn't that wonderful? May God bless us, I pray, Father. Please bless us with your Spirit. Bless us with the promises of your word and help us to stay on that straight and narrow path we've read about and not be led away by the enticing words of others. And please keep us safe, Father, through this rest of this day and the coming week. We know Satan has his arrows to destroy and pierce and hurt, and we ask protection through the armor you've told us about. And please, though, Father, it's only protected because of you. Guide our steps, I pray. In Jesus' name, amen. Till we meet again, may God bless us. Bye for now.